try to, I think, hold it together. It's just an incredibly torturous time, I think, for all of us, not just business, but all Canadians. But I think where we've been really focused through all this, whether the gloves are coming off tomorrow or today, we are in this for the long haul, because I think what we know is the tariffs is whether they're used as a big stick or non-trade related concessions here to really reshape many relationships. And of course, we're very concerned about our own in the U.S. and this broader plan to really shift business forward.
We could be in peak condition for
what that means for us.
Yeah, we just got another bulletin on the wire. Donald Trump says tariffs may cause short-term disruption. I think that is an understatement from the president there. But, Candace Lang, as we look at this, some of the data I've seen in the analysis is that there's about $2.4 million in the economy that are considered to be trade exposed. This is analysis done by Trevor Kuhn at the University of Calgary. 6% of all jobs in Canada. And those are pretty much split evenly between companies that export and then the suppliers and service providers. The order of magnitude of what the president called a short-term disruption for those workers. We've seen projections of a 2008-2009 style recession, maybe unemployment rate as high as 10%. Is that what you're expecting at the trade run? On your own analysis?
Yes, we've modeled this in a full 25% tariff retaliatory measures taken scenario. Canada is looking at moving in recession by mid-year. Now, having said that, and your comments about what came out, I think the thing that gives me a bit of relief or hope is that people are trying to use the economy on both sides of the border. So when you really look at the economy that are actually input to their manufacturing, you mentioned the jobs on our side of the border. Over 2 billion, 1.4 million jobs are supported from our trade and the business we do every day in the United States. And if the agenda really is to domicile some of those businesses in the manufacturing, it takes time, which is why we are doubling down in this moment on leveraging that time, starting yesterday, on what we have to focus internally to strengthen our position. And we think it's absolutely the right time to address our own internal third-like barriers on internal trade.
Well, there's some more developments, and I apologize for framing this idea in real time, but we're all learning to see how much Candace Lang. Donald Trump is not worried about the market reaction to these tariffs. This is a lot of people thought was very worried about the market. And it's not a sign of the strength of the economy. But he also says the agreement is very substantial on tariffs with the European Union. So this suggests that this is really a broader agenda to balance global trade, and his belief that Western democracies in particular have taken advantage of the U.S. economic might, and the liberalization of trade has led to manufacturing jobs and other industries flourishing in countries outside of the United States. And if we presume that Howard Lutnick was speaking the truth the other day as his confirmation, this is about getting those industries back. He suggested this about pharmaceuticals. We know a lot of those are made in Europe. But this turns into a global economic challenge now, not just a continental one.
Yeah, I think that agenda has been brewing and dripping out over the last while. But I think, and we know, I think there's a lot we disagree with on Trump's positioning around trade deficits and how he sees that, and even some of the false narratives we believe he puts out there about those trade relationships. But I think it goes deep into the lack of understanding how integrated supply chains are within all those trade relationships. And in fact, I think what will be very interesting, although unfortunately probably the painful way to go about this, is that the American economy and American workers and people will have to experience, what it takes to now unwind those integrated and efficient supply chains that actually support manufacturing within the United States. And that is, depending on which sector and supply chain you take, they are complex, and they are built that way because they work well for business today.
And this line here, this is a final point. The government is watching this in real time too. trying to figure out how to respond and to calibrate our response in such a way that that Americans feel the pain and the pressure of the president, but without compounding the misery of seeing Canadians workers. I mean, what would your advice to Justice Trudeau and the people advising him and the premiers be in the president in this last one?
Yeah, I think as we've talked about, we want to avoid tariffs and escalation at all costs, but if we need to respond, that work is being done, and I think measured, calculated, surgical, precise to be strategically oriented with the impact we want to have, that is best. And then I think more broadly, when we look at, the fiscal policy, maybe bracing for the impact and supporting businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses that can absorb such shock and impact, it's important to be timely, very targeted, and, try to make sure that we are looking at and that we don't have to lock ourselves into fiscal costs. And because we have to be measured in our response on that front as well. So timely, targeted, and temporary.
James Lyon, CEO of the Canadian
Great. We are triumphant.
Doesn't look like they got inside.
Well, if you're just joining us, this is a special extended edition of Power in Politics, responding to escalated threats from the U.S. president. The tariffs are coming tomorrow, and by February 18th on Canada's oil and gas sector, 25% on everything tomorrow is the latest we have from the White House. 10% on oil and gas by the 18th of February is what we're seeing on the wires. We will have tape of Donald Trump soon, and we will bring that to you the minute it is available in its entirety. So, Rosie, since we started, our chief political she's always here. Look, since we started, it was Canada, it was oil and gas. Now it's the European Union. We're talking about this is not just a continental thing. This is a larger global tariff as a cudgel agenda.
Yeah, as a cudgel, but also I think, and we've been talking about this as an attempt to return the American economy to previous glory that it had. When manufacturing was based in the United States, before so much of it was offshore to China. That is fundamentally what this is about. It's about trying to get industry and manufacturing back into the United States and create more jobs and opportunity for the U.S. The European Union piece is interesting to me because it does then, I think, open up some possibility as of bigger allies for Canada. Yeah. Right? We have a free trade agreement with the European Union. What then could we do if we align ourselves with allies to take this on? I'm not saying it's going to blunt what is about to happen to us. Certainly it will be damaging. But if you can find someone that you can sit beside and stand up to the president, I think that there's an interesting position there for me. But it also shows that to his point that we will hear eventually when he speaks, is that there's nothing we can do. If there is no negotiating tactic, well, then what are we willing to do, and who can we align ourselves with in order to make sure that this has as little effect as possible, or in order to reshape our economy entirely as well, so we are no longer dependent on the United States the way we are. I mean,
we began with those planned tariffs on products from Mexico, Canada, and China, which have the potential of impacting your bottom line.
Now, this was a promise that President Trump made before taking office, and the White House announcing it will take place tomorrow.
The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept.
You heard the man.
As you heard there, the plan to implement 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and 10% on China. These tariffs mean U.S. companies buying the imports will have to pay a percentage extra to the U.S. Treasury.
Trump's payment for Commerce Secretary argues this will pressure American companies to buy from domestic producers while serving as leverage against the three countries. But Many economists say tariffs typically lead to higher prices for consumers on everything from groceries to cars and electronics. Tonight, 7 News reporter Ko3Hy is sharing voices from both sides of this tariff tug-of-war. Our local lawmakers are already pushing back. President Donald Trump is on the verge of imposing tariffs on all Canadian goods. Here in Buffalo, rigidized metals, I'm told that could be a very, very bad thing.
I've been here for 85 years, and we've oftentimes had a Canadian flag flying here.
The White House announced that starting Saturday, President Trump will impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada. Rigidized Metals has operated in Buffalo's Old First Ward since the 40s, and Richard Smith, its president, tells me Canadian goods are woven into the fabric of his company.
We probably buy, 20 to 25% of our carbon steel from Canada.
Those rolls of steel are then texturized and sold to customers across North America.
Opposed tariffs are always a bad idea.
But not every single store in our area feels the same way about those tariffs, especially right here at the Made in America store in Elma, where everything is, you guessed it, made in America.
I love Canada, but I don't worry about tariffs because I'm all about Made in America.
Mark Andal, the owner of the Made in America store in Elma, wouldn't be paying these tariffs, but thinks they could help other businesses.
I don't mind tariffs at all. I think it'll help American companies because we're always trying to get back to where we were. American companies need all the help they can get.
And he thinks they might inspire more people to shop for American products.
If they have the fear that tariff are, raising prices, then just shop in your own country, shop within your borders, you'll be fine.
Meanwhile, Congressman Tim Kennedy doesn't think this is a good plan. He told reporters he's holding out hope the White House rescinds this, just like the federal funding freeze earlier this week.
Hopefully, they'll listen to us just like they did earlier this week, and they rescind this order as well.
As of Friday afternoon, plans to impose those tariffs will start this weekend. For a Voice for Erie County, Ko3Hy.
When we look at the sum total of what he says he's going ahead with here, what's your assessment of that?
Well, it's hard to accept that bottom line. I mean, if you think of just oil, Canada is an enormously important source of refinery fuel in the United States. You put a 25% tariff on Canadian oil, you're looking at 25 cents a gallon of gasoline. People will notice that. And if he goes further to impose tariffs on all oil imports later in the month, then we're going to see a big impact on oil as a feedstock to all sorts of manufacturing, oil as an input into gasoline, and that's just been historically a recipe for inflationary pressures. More broadly, the things that have been so painful to the American consumer have been food and energy. And as the reporter mentioned, we get a lot of vegetables from Mexico. We have an enormous exposure there. So I don't see any real way that you levy these kinds of taxes. And these are big taxes. This is on the order of something that looks like $500 billion over 10 years and not expect to have some economic impact. And that's just the sort of straight-on impact effect of the U.S. announcement that we heard this afternoon. Remember, Canada has been preparing to retaliate and has prepared 2 levels of retaliation and could do that as quickly as these are being implemented. Mexico has promised the same kinds of retaliation, not as firm on their planning. But if you start moving a car back and forth across both the Mexican and the Canadian border and getting tariffs from both countries in the process, that's a really big impact on all the economies. And so this is a far from unimportant move by the president.
Yeah, unless, of course, they're not going to be around for that long, Douglas. And I wonder your thoughts on reporting in the Wall Street Journal this morning, the White House considering several off-ramps, that this is where you start. And then maybe you take some things off as conditions are met. We heard earlier from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talked about the tariffs here during a meeting of the Council of U.S.-Canada Relations. Here was his take.
Right now, we're showing the new American administration that they have a strong partner in Canada when it comes to upholding border security, all while simultaneously underscoring that we won't back down, that if tariffs are implemented against Canada, we will respond. We won't relent until tariffs are removed, and of course, everything is on the table.
So what moves Donald Trump in this case? Is it action on fentanyl or immigration, or is it in fact dollar for dollar matching of these tariffs?
It's far from obvious, but we spent the day at the American Action Forum trying to track exactly what the president was going to do, and the rumors flew fast and furious. So there have obviously been a lot of discussions between the Americans and the Canadians and Mexicans within the White House and the administration. Various leaks come out in the various news sources. They get disavowed. That suggests to me that they are toying with lots of potential off-ramps, that there have been a lot of proposals that the staff supported, didn't get supported by the president, and we'll see how this plays out over time. Certainly, the president has mentioned two things on a regular basis, and historically, what the candidate Donald Trump says he does as president, when he repeats something a lot, you should listen to the character of it at a minimum. Number one has been he cares a lot about autos, and he wants to move auto production back to the U.S. from both Mexico and Canada. So look for something on that border crossing 6, 7, 8 times to get changed in this negotiation. And the second is better border controls, both in the northern and the southern border, for both people and drugs, fentanyl in particular. Those seem to be the key sticking points for the negotiations.
Well, then you add on the aspect that he wants lower taxes, Douglas, and he has also argued that tariffs are not just about balancing trade relationships more in a way he sees favorable. It's about putting more revenue in the Treasury's coffers. What actual dollar figures would we be looking like here that, say, an external revenue service, if that's going to be created, is going to be able to collect?
Well, I mean, I say this lovingly, but he's wrong on both fronts. This is not going to balance bilateral trade deficits. That's never been an effective strategy. It didn't work with China back in 2018. It's not going to work this time either. Not with China, not with Mexico, not with Canada. The trade deficit situation, a broader macroeconomic phenomenon, they'll have a different strategy if they want to deal with that. And tariffs had never been a broad-based revenue source. At the peak, in the McKinley area that he's so fond of mentioning, we're in single digits, low single digits as a fraction of GDP. The federal government is spending well over 20% of GDP right now. There is no way in any feasible scenario that tariffs will be the broad-based revenue source that finances that kind of expenditure. And, we've heard a lot of talk about DOGE and controls on spending. We're not going to move that south of 18% down to something like 12 or a feasible number. So put aside any notion of trade balance, put aside any notion that this is the budget balance. This is a strategy to be viewed as an international economic.
If President Trump follows through on this threat to impose 25% tariff across the board on Canadian goods, how should Canada respond?
Well, I think we should start responding today. I think that we should publish for consultation a retaliation list. I think it should be massive, right? It should be $200 billion. That's not saying that we retaliate at $200 billion, but giving us like a menu, like a smorgasbord of choices. And we need to publish it now because when President Trump says America first, I believe him. And I believe that he doesn't care that much if Canadian politicians are jumping around, banging our fists on the table, etc. But he cares about Americans. And I want Wisconsin dairy farmers to see themselves on that list and to be calling the White House and to be saying, Mr. President, we elected you, but now it's going to be terrible. We're not going to be able to sell stuff to Canada. I want Michigan blue-collar workers that make washing machines in Michigan to see their washing machines on the list and to call up the White House and say, Mr. President, what the heck here? We love selling stuff to Canada. Do not do this. And the thing that I think can sometimes be missed, especially if Americans think about this, is I think, if you will permit me, David, to put myself in the mind of American, I think you guys don't think about Canada very much. I think when you think about Canada, maybe you think about hockey, maybe you think we're quite nice, and we say please and thank you. And probably we say sorry a little more than you guys would. And I just don't think you think of us as major players. And that is fine with us. But what's missing in the calculation about Canada is uniquely in the whole world, we have economic leverage over you. You guys are not a big trading nation, but insofar as you export stuff, you sell it to your Canadian pals. We're a larger market for the United States.
I appreciate the Riddler's bounty of puzzles and brain teasers. All for our amusement.
He likes it, Shark. We're doing it for his amusement.
Then I propose we forge a strong relationship with him, based on mutual amusement.
Whoa, look out, Eddie. This is a clearance level X area.
You talk long enough. Is it safe outside? Can you get me out? I'll open the doors.
Oh, thank God. Wait, which superheroes did you say you were again?
Okay, I admit it. Luther had me researching the ship, the colognes, the phasing, everything.
Really couldn't care less, mate. We just want the nanite bombs you made for Waller out of our heads. Now!
That's all you want? Of course. Will you let me go free?
Depends on you, man. Let's go.
This technology is one of a kind. Reversing a nanite craft to the brain
This ain't
stem.
show and tell. Just do it.
Right. The process should be relatively painless.
It was their stupid idea. Oi!
Give me access to Luther's files now, and I might not shoot your other leg.
I'm afraid I can't allow that.
Director Waller, in person. I don't suppose you brought a warrant, but it wouldn't matter anyway. My secrets are my own.
You listen to me.
Thank you for your service, Happerson. You're dismissed.
What?
Delete and purge
20
all
years
data.
I worked for you, Lex.
Hack, stop this.
Already on it. I'll save what I can.
Death Force X. I'm not gonna say you betrayed my trust, because you never had it. I counted on you going rogue to get us inside LexCorp.
All humans do is manipulate. In my home, Father would never...
I'm your daddy now, Shark. That goes for all of
Now need to be reminding not so much the White House, but all those great Americans who sell us your great American stuff. And I think what we need to be saying is, we love your stuff. You guys make great stuff. That's why we buy so much of it. And really, don't you want to keep selling it to us?
A criticism I hear of your approach is by doing this, by coming up with that menu or that long list, you're going to further raise the hackles of President Trump. You're kind of putting more of a target on your back. What do you say to those critics who argue that?
You know, I have a lot of respect for President Trump.
Sure.
I think he has been throughout his career underestimated.
I'm your daddy. Oh, those bombs ain't coming out. Now you better get that into your heads if you want to keep it. Now. Luther's ahead of us, and we've got nothing on him. What are you going to do about that?
Well, Ivy was in here, boss. Maybe we could ask her.
What, Ivy? Poison Ivy? Dead Poison Ivy after Scarecrow gave Gotham a crop dusting. That one?
I got a real strong hunch she ain't pushing up daisies no more.
Find her. Bring her to me for questioning.
We'll find her. How will we find her?
At least your shipper cut us these schematics for the latest LexCorp weapon line. Military grade, reliable, #1 choice for crooked PMCs and whom
Let us begin a search for this Poison Ivy. Good name. Strong.
With a lot of people close to the president. One of them actually was in my house here in Toronto for supper a few weeks ago. I'm not going to tell you. No, of course I'm not going to tell you. He won't come back for supper, right? But he said, the president has spent, since the election, weeks and weeks and weeks hanging out with really smart people. And he has some really good and clear ideas. So I take the president very, very seriously as a smart guy, actually, with a clear world view. I also observe his negotiating style. And what I observe, which I think everybody sees, is this is not a guy for whom weakness is attractive. I would say
anyone going to devour Happerson's
weakness
corpse?
is provocation. I think this relation is not a negotiating strategy with him. This person close to the president said to me, this was before the inauguration, he said, Trump thinks it's just great. He's going around yelling at the world, threatening the world, and countries are just tripping over themselves.
Comrades.
Like,
We are defeated
they're
with
negotiating
no
with
real
themselves.
plan.
He's not even president.
You know,
and
you
they're
could just
offering
ask for the living search
$1
engine for help.
And
It's been poking around the league's databases. The Batsman figured out how to find your plant lady.
This Ivy has the abilities of a goddess. Surveilling her feels profane.
Well, your Batman has a problem with boundaries. He built a pheromone tracker to find Ivy. Just modded your comms. If Ivy's in the city, this tracker will lead you to her.
And I think we need to
You kidding?
know that the president
Maybe those leak
Ronald
chumps
Reagan
should be worried about.
our relationship.
If y'all want to end up a fully plated spring mix, you better put me in charge and let me talk to Ives first.
So I think that we need to confident essential. But I think the way we get there, generally in life, but particularly with this president, is to say to him, you know what? Really, pushing for him is not a good idea. There are people who is going to understand that. Because I also really understand that. And
we must follow the tracker.
People he listens to the most are Americans. The people he's going to listen to are your what Canada listens to is linked to American culture. Most totally business leaders, people who are watching the stock market, as President Trump does very carefully, they actually have a great relationship with Canada. Why would you want to mess that up?
That's what made me a dumb-sounding question, and that is,
There are
thank you. What does President Trump want? Here we are, a few days away from this February 1st deadline that he's put in place. We talked a lot about traffic drugs, we talked about immigration. Do you have a clear sense of what would have to happen for him to support those things?
No, that is not a dumb question at all. It's an excellent question.
Cheer up, Floyd. You get to meet Poison Ivy, the girl who actually saved Gotham from that nutcase Scarecrow.
him and the very smart people say. But based on their past behavior, based on what we're seeing, is seeking to accomplish. First of all, he would just like Canada to negotiate with itself as much as possible, and he'd like us to empty out. So that's the first thing. I think number two, what President Trump is trying to do is create uncertainty for investors in every country other than the United States. He wants to make investors, and they're thinking about where to put that the next dollar. We have no idea what President Trump is going to do. We know he wants us to invest in the U.S. We know what he's going to do. So what the heck? Let's put our money in the United States. And that is not a dumb strategy, right? You know, just by saying a few things on social media, you automatically boost capital in the United States. I mean, the third thing that the president wants to do is as we would say here.
So here she is.
And I think that
thought she'd be taller.
Are you serious right now? Poison ivy is a redhead.
Very much.
This is a plant.
But I know Americans, you guys don't wake up in the morning and think, hey, how's our relationship with the community going? And especially since I do sophisticated worldview of what he wants to do. And it seems pretty clear to me that if you can show the rest of the world how mean and tough he can be with his closest partners and allies, how much he's prepared to give up. And it's really nice Canadians who, throughout history, have been great partners for the U.S. How do you think that's going to make the Chinese feel? So I think there's that calculation.
She is not made of meat.
That's kind of on the
Is this what you call a vegetarian option?
I do want to
I don't know you, but
a positive
pheromones remember you.
That I think is in the president.
Strange emotions.
Maybe two.
Tell me about it. Wasn't expecting you to come in fun size.
The first one is
you really don't know me.
The president
Holly and Ivy forever.
Very concerned about
intense story burning letters.
Security for USA, economic security, but also national security. And in that context, kind of locking down your neighbors.
Really did a number on you, huh, Red? He dressed you up in that outfit too? No.
Locking down your continent by saying, hey Canadians,
he shut me in a room in his tower. If I worked on the things he wanted, I got a whole hour of sunlight every day.
What did he want?
Weapons, making them more effective against the alien invaders. You know, they're very susceptible to plant toxins. And, I know all about plant toxins.
We know. That's why they call you Poison Ivy.
It's just Ivy, weirdo.
Where's Lex now?
I don't know. Something spooked him, I guess. He got in his big robot suit and stomped off. Ooh, I know that look. Who you murdering? The corrupted things that are coming. All of them. They're poisoning the earth with their gross bodies. So I lured them here.
The wrath of nature. I like it.
Oh, this is my friend Daphne. We'll make all the aliens choke to death on spores. You make sure Daphne doesn't die, or you're next.
Waller, be advised Lex is AWOL in a power suit, and Ivy's an eco-terrorist middle schooler. Dead shot out.
How'd we end up hugging a giant plant? I have allergies. Anyone care?
A lot of things. Locking down your continent by saying, hey Canadians, be the 51st state.
What exactly are we helping your plant do here?
Their name is Daphne.
It's not going to work.
With my plant,
Daddy's going to get on.
they'll swallow
and we're going to
release
say
a toxic plume into the alien's internal...
Locking down your security by saying, hey Canada, let's work together on continental, economic, and
physical security, you're going to find everyone in Canada saying, yeah, we'll sign up to that. And that has been the Canadian choice throughout history. I mean, the whole reason Canada's a member of the G7 is because you guys said, we don't want to be alone with the Europeans. We want to have our Canadian pals with us. And where Canada feels our interests are aligned with the U.S., we are an outstanding partner. We can be your wingman. So on that kind of continental security point, we can be really helpful. And then I think there's a second program, a second win-win scenario that I believe Scott Bessent's confirmation as Secretary of the Treasury really opens up for the U.S. and for Canada. Scott Bessent is an incredibly sophisticated global economic thinker. He is a man who has a very well worked out view of the global macro, not just environment, but the global macro system. And he is someone who spent his career thinking about moments when that system changes. In fact, you could say that his investing strategy has been figure out where the imbalances are and invest there, figure out where the changes are going to be and invest there. And I do believe that it's right to point to there being global macro imbalances, which are a problem for the whole world, but particularly the U.S. The fact is, the global economy today is run based on the U.S. consumer. It is run based on incredibly strong U.S. domestic demand. And what that is requiring is that you guys run, just like I run, fiscal deficits, which at a certain point surely are going to become unsustainable. In the meantime, China has been running, notwithstanding frequent protestations this is going to change, an economic system that is based on selling stuff to the world and not having strong domestic demand. And China over and over again promises and fails to have strong domestic demand in China. I think it is entirely possible that the historic role that Scott Bessent has signed up for is to be the guy who writes those global financial and trade imbalances, a kind of plaza accords for our time. And Canada can be a valuable and intelligent partner for the U.S. in the effort to rebalance the global economy. We're chairing the G7 this year. We get it. And that is where I see two kind of quite new and important win-wins for Team Trump that Canada can offer. So continental security, national and economic, help you guys with this great and essential project of rebalancing the global economy, of righting those global financial imbalances. But we can't do it if you keep beating up on us and like slapping us in the face.
A cornerstone of your campaign is you've had experience dealing with President Trump before. You know how he operates, you know his negotiating strategy. I think we could both say this isn't the same playbook as last time. Maybe it's a revised version of it. He wasn't talking about subsuming Greenland or wresting control of the Panama Canal back or making Canada do the first state the last time. I am curious how you watched what unfolded over the weekend. The president making a threat against Colombia, and in the span of really 9 hours, going from saying he was going to levy tariffs at 25 to 50% to remove it completely, and Colombia essentially folding in the face of that. What does that tell you about his tact, his strategy this time around?
Well, I look at it more from the Colombian perspective, and I would say never make a threat you're not prepared to act on. And so from the Canadian perspective, when we put retaliatory tariffs on the table, we as a country need to be fully prepared to act on it. And I think I hope it doesn't come to that. I really, really do. And I think it would be better for Canada and the U.S. not to come to it.
So that's what it tells me from a Canadian perspective. What it tells me from a U.S. perspective is unless you have leverage of some kind, the president is not going to care what you do. And that's why what gives me such medium-term confidence about the Canadian position is we have leverage, and we have negative leverage. If you hit us, we uniquely in the whole world do have the economic capacity to hit back, and we also have positive leverage. There is a lot that we need for you guys, and I think, like, broadly in the United States, I think Americans know that. Like, as we said at the beginning, David, Americans, I don't really spend a ton of time thinking about Canada. But I think when you think about Canada, you think our friends to the north. And I think, you know, if you want to pull back, and I do really think President Trump has been taking a true historical view of the U.S. I truly do. I truly do. And I think he sees himself as someone who was president at a huge moment in history, and he wants to take advantage of that. So if you take that kind of a perspective on the Canada-U.S. relationship, I think what you will see is the strength and the prosperity of the United States has, to a very significant degree, been based on the fact that you've never had to religious law. You know, you have applied
I have a question. More of a comment. We have internal organs also.
You'll be fine. Probably. Now go defend! Shoot! What are they doing to my plant, baby? It's suffocating! Slowing our growth! Free my helper before those aliens pollute everything! Plant babies can't protect themselves! Get the rest of the soldiers! Oh, I almost forgot! Daphne uses nutrients from dead baddies to build up something I call an affliction. It's really effective at chilling the fluid in weak bodies.
Damn, that's cold.
Yep. Just tell me where you want it released. From Daphne or a little helper.
Negotiated trade deal with the EU and renegotiated NAFTA, which is President Trump's trade deal. He said it's the best deal in the world. One of the things I learned, taught by Canada's brilliant professional trade negotiators, is the most important thing in a trade negotiation is be sure the home team is aligned. And that is a real priority for me. Maybe of less interest to your American listeners, but here in Canada, the place I would start is us all on the same page, working together.
Well, let me ask you lastly about that before I move on to other topics. Do you feel that Canadians understand the gravity of this moment? And I saw the Bank of Canada was out with a projection that GDP could take a 6% hit if these tariffs go into place. You certainly know this Prime Minister well, work with him closely, and I wonder if you think that he and the government now is prepared to take the kind of hardline approach that you're advocating for here in the context of this campaign. Is your read that the government is approaching with kind of a commensurate level of seriousness and, I guess, aggressiveness might be the word?
You started by asking me about Canadians, and I think that is actually the most important.
We are growing, but we still need your protection.
I am absolutely certain that Canadians understand how serious
Let's upgrade that shark brain of yours.
I've been traveling around the country a lot. As you may have heard, we have a campaign for the leadership of the country right now. So I've been
Don't mess up protecting my plants, friends. I haven't decided yet if I need new friends.
Be sure that so I think
I must fight harder.
in the parade, but I think now is the time to you know, warrants are opening up. You're going to see us during the actually like this, but I think we're going to be a really,
It's a talent.
We're in the final process, so don't mess up.
The shark has entered a trance-like combat
what we're
state.
trying to
Time
do
for gasping death for our enemies. Now for a first at big, fully grown Daphne. Nature always wins. Phew, deja vu.
Very important part of Team Canada. And I also want to give a shout out to labor leaders and business leaders. The way we succeeded in NAFTA 1 or in Trump 1 was by building a true Team Canada approach, which was premiers of provinces and territories across the country. It was business leaders, it was labor leaders, it was Indigenous leaders, and that's what we're going to have to do this time.
I want to ask you about the letter that you wrote resigning from your post. It had this kind of seismic effect, certainly within your party and government. We felt it in the States as well.
That's for Canadian political events, isn't it? I heard a lot of people saying, wow, Canada, like, it usually is so boring. You've actually become interesting.
But the
We're surprised ourselves by how interesting you
and huge, and we're here talking in part because of that. Obviously, this campaign is a result of that. Did you know at the time it was going to have that kind of seismic effect that it did?
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
I mean, when I wrote my letter and published it, that was on a Monday. I assumed that on the Tuesday, Mark Carney would be sworn in as finance minister. And I think that's what the Prime Minister assumed too.
Something that was in that letter was an impression that you need to do more to keep your fiscal powder dry. As you look back on the last 2 fiscal years, do you regret not doing more to kind of shore up the fiscal position of this country?
Well, as you know, David, visiting us from the United States, Canada is in an outstanding fiscal position compared to you guys. I mean, you guys are looking at deficits 7+. We're looking at a deficit, 1 and a bit. We have a AAA credit rating. Our debt to GDP ratio is the lowest in the G7, hugely lower than yours. So Canada, the fundamental fiscal position of Canada is strong. What I did believe in the fall, and this conviction became stronger first with President Trump's election and then with his 25% tariff threat, was that we had to, as a country, turn all of our attention to that threat. We had to recognize that President Trump was not just blustering. I'm one of the people who takes him very seriously and sees him as a very smart guy who has a thought-out plan. That is what I saw then. That is what I see now. And so it was very clear to me that as a government, it had to be like heart and nerve and sinew. Like everything had to be focused on that. And writing checks that would cost us $6 billion as this, train was coming down the track, to me was irresponsible.
You invoked Mark Carney a minute ago, and he's committed to balancing the budget, I guess, reporting small deficits from time to time. Are you prepared to also call for balanced budgets, and if so, in what time?
I believe that we need to be fiscally responsible, absolutely. I believe that Canada...
There's some new reporting that has broken since we've been on the air. It's something we've covered for years on this program, and it's happening. It can only be described as the start of a massive, much larger than expected purge at the FBI of FBI agents and officials. Many of them, in one way or another, touch the investigations into Donald Trump. Sources telling NBC News this: the Office of Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove asked the FBI for a list of Bureau employees involved in January 6 cases, sparking panic inside the Bureau about people who fear retribution by the Trump administration amidst an ongoing purge of FBI leadership. Meanwhile, my colleague, NBC's Ken Galanian, reports that several top FBI executives were told to resign or be fired, and that the purge includes more than 20 heads of FBI field offices, including those in Miami and Washington, D.C. Joining our coverage, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman. Also joining us, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, I've got your reporting in front of me, but why don't you share it with our audience?
Yeah, some of it's sort of chasing all day, and it's tough because there's so many, rumors and a lot of worry being spread within the Justice Department, within the FBI. So there's community, obviously, of all these people in these January 6 cases. The FBI side, on the DOJ side, and so what we can report is that there was this request for this list of all these individuals who worked on January 6 cases, and that's something that the Washington field office has thus far. The issue here is that it's such a large list, and so the question is, how are they going to figure out?
And Daphne's hungry.
I did it, okay? I put the bloody bomb in her head ages ago. What? I thought you'd thank me. I didn't trust her. She's a ranger.
Red, I'll make this up to you. We've been through worse together. Like knowing my ex. Bombs are this season's shot caller. And they're discreet. You don't have to coordinate around them or nothing.
At ease, Harkness. Hey, kid. Want to meet a penguin man? Get you a greenhouse all to yourself?
I don't like penguins.
You know what? I get it. You're tired and cranky. Honestly, these four make me feel the same way. Come on, let's get you out of here.
Okay.
Colonel Flagg is surprisingly good with children.
And I thought Zoe was scary.
This is even better than getting more teeth.
All done with your little garden party? 'Cause surprise, surprise, I just discovered Lex Luthor's suit uses Brainiac tech.
Who they're going to be
I'm going to use that to find him.
focused on and particularly targeting here, right? Because it's just so many people largely about the opinion at the atmosphere in terms of number of defendants. You're talking about over 1,500 defendants overall, and this touched basically every field office in the country. And some field offices were a lot more enthusiastic about these cases, frankly, than others, because there was a lot of skepticism about these cases within the Bureau, and there was some, I think, tension between the FBI and DOJ and the Washington field office and other field offices across the country over the handling of these cases overall. And but so I think there's a span of this, right? Because there are people who were very vaguely involved in, at one point, one January 6th case, and then there's people who were really in the weeds, and January 6th was their main focus. And I think those are the people probably have the most to worry about in the coming days over whether or not, they're basically just going to be fired or targeted based on what we've seen at headquarters thus far and coming out of the Justice Department so far. But if you were to go after everybody who touched the January 6th case, I had one former official say that would be like 3/4 of the Bureau, basically, because a lot of people were involved with this on one stage. And remember, those cases range from those very low-level cases, sort of those misdemeanor cases that were of the most controversy, all the way up to seditious conspiracy. But the more common one was those assault on a federal officer charges that were really common, those AFO charges. And even people who were skeptical of the Justice Department's handling of those overall were behind those cases, and I think most of the American public would be too. When you have a cop getting beat by a rioter, that's something that most people say that should be something that's prosecuted by the federal government. So I think the details are really going to matter here about who they end up focusing on, Nicole, about as they go about sort of this ongoing purge of FBI. It's going to trickle down into the rank and file of the FBI.
Ryan Riley, I want to make sure I got this down as you said it. 3/4 of the Bureau touched these cases in one way or another?
Yeah, I think that was a rough estimate, right, from a foreign official. But that's when you're talking about the scope of this, right, in every field office, when you do an arrest, for example, that's a lot of people who are just involved in that arrest directly, right? So, there might be somebody who's actually handling this case, who's actually championing one case.
The goldfish are back in their tank. They're happy and healthy. What do you think? The goldfish are back in their tank. Going forward. But then when you actually go to execute that arrest, you need a bunch of officials involved in that. So then, when you're talking about the paperwork here, there's a lot of names on a lot of these documents. You're talking about the intelligence analysts who might have been involved with it as well, because obviously everything has to be turned over in discovery. So those are all names that would be required to be turned over to defense attorneys on this. And when for example, let's take the case, one of the only ongoing cases involving a January 6th defendant who actually was convicted of plotting to murder FBI agents who investigated him. And that was a jury in Tennessee that convicted him of that separately. That case is still ongoing, although his defense attorney is representing that Donald Trump's pardon should apply to that conduct as well, even though that was conduct that was performed way after January 6th when he plotted to murder the FBI employees. But that case, for example, just comes to mind because that involved, I remember, a large number of FBI employees. And when they turned over those documents, it was a lot of names that were associated with that. Because in the discovery process, you've got to turn all of those names over. So even if there's only sort of the